The power of action. Knowledge is the power of action. Knowledge is not enough. Ladies and gentlemen, God bless you all. This sermon encourages putting knowledge into action and highlights the biblical importance of living out the truth we know. If you want to make any adjustments or add more details, please do it at the bottom. In today's world, knowledge is more accessible than ever before. We have countless books, sermons, and teachings at our fingertips. However, despite the vast amount of knowledge we can gain, there is a critical truth we must understand. Knowledge without action is useless. The Bible teaches us that it is not enough to know what is right or good if we do not act upon it. James chapter 1 verse 22 tells us, "But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." This powerful message calls us to bridge the gap between knowing and doing. We must not only absorb wisdom, but also put it into practice. Number one, the danger of knowing without doing. Brother, it is easy to fall into the trap of gathering knowledge without action on it. We may feel wise and even superior before because of what we know, but knowledge without application is ineffective. In fact, it can become a source of pride and complacency. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 26, Jesus gives us the parable of the man who built his house on the sand. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The wind came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. The lesson is clear. It's not enough to hear or how the teachings of Jesus. We must live them. A house built on knowledge without action is like a structure without a solid foundation. It will not stand when trials come. Number two, faith in action. True faith requires action. The book of James speaks strongly about the relationship between faith and words and works. In James 2, verse 17, it states, "Faith by itself, if it is not accomplished by action, is dead." Faith is not just believing in God intellectually, it is showing that belief through our choices, behavior, and how we treat others. If we have knowledge of God's will but do not live according to it, our faith is incomplete. Abraham, for example, was counted as righteous not just because of his faith, but because of his actions that accompanied. When God called him to sacrifice his son Isaac, Abraham acted in obedience, demonstrated the depth of his faith. Genesis 22. It was not his knowledge of God's commands that justified him, but his willingness to act upon them. Number three, the call to be doers. Being a doer of the word means taking deliberate steps to live out the truth we know. Every day, we have opportunities to put into practice what we have learned, whether it's showing kindness to someone in need, standing up for justice, or forgiving those who wrong us. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke 10, verses 25 to 27, we see this principle in action. This priest and the Levite, both knowledgeable in the law, passed by the wounded man. He was the Samaritan, someone who acted out of compassion, who fulfilled God's will. This parable reminds us that knowledge of the law is meaningless unless it compels us to show love and mercy in our actions. Number four, ladies and gentlemen, the consequences of inaction. Jesus warns of the consequences of knowing the right thing to do but failing to act. In Luke chapter 12, verse 47 to 48, it says, that servant who knows his master's will and does not get ready or does not do what his master wants will be beaten with many blows. This passage teaches us that greater responsibility comes with greater knowledge. If we know God's will but fail to live it out, we are held accountable. Knowledge, when left unapplied, not only diminishes its value but also leads to judgment. God desires us to be his hands and feet in this world. Acting on this wisdom, it impacts to us how to move from knowledge to action. Now, start small. Often we are overwhelmed by the gap between what we know and what we do. Start with small, manageable steps of obedience. Each small action leads to a bigger change in our lives, in our lives. Seek accountability. Surround yourself with people who will encourage you to live out your faith. They can remind you to act on what you know when you are tempted to remain passive. Pray for courage. Sometimes we know what to do, but lack the courage to act. Pray for strength and boldness to live out God's will in your life. Knowledge is a gift, but is not only truly valuable when it moves us to action. Let us not be like the man who built his house on sand and the servant who knew his master's will but did not act. Instead, into let us do be doers of the word, putting into practice the wisdom we have gained, so that our faith may be alive and our lives a reflection of God's truth. As Jesus said in John 13:17, now that you know these things, you will be blessed. If you do them, let us live out the knowledge we have received. And in doing so, we will be transformed and bring God's love to the world around us.